Hey Anant, great to have you here with us on Network Capital. We try and explore different kinds of careers, and yours has been a pretty interesting one across continents in an area that I don't believe we have too many masterclasses on Network Capital on plastics. But I think there's a lot more to the story, which I hope to find out today. So Anant, how do you like to identify yourself? What do you introduce yourself as when you go to a party?
Utkarsh, thanks for having me, and I'm very, very excited to be here. And when I go to a party, I would say the best way to introduce myself is if I say I'm a plastics man or I'm a plastics guy, that's a pretty bad introduction nowadays.
Yeah,
So the best way to say it is, and that's actually really what we do is I work in the recyclable and biodegradable polymer field.
right.
And that's really, I know we have a lot to talk about in terms of sustainability, but the way I introduce myself is to talk about the future of plastics, which is, headed towards or is already there towards, a culture of reusability, recyclability, and a sort of, you know, using sustainability starting to use sustainability right from a design perspective of a product, not as an afterthought. So
Got
that's
it.
how I would usually introduce myself in a party. Or to keep things simple, I usually just say I work in commodities. That's usually
Yeah.
the best way to keep it simple. And I'll let people ask me more about it if they're actually curious.
How did you get started in this space? Like, what were the early days of entrepreneurship? Like, you went to Babson, which is obviously well known for entrepreneurship, but did you
Uh-huh.
always want to be working for yourself or working in plastics?
So the truth is, I actually got pulled in this space because of it being sort of a family enterprise. My father started this company, and for the longest time, I actually resisted going into this enterprise because I worked outside of the company as long as I possibly could. I had various jobs with JP Morgan, Accenture, DreamWorks, Microsoft, all kind, and my real first thing that I did outside of college, outside of Babson, was I used to run a 4-student by student venture capital company,
Hmm.
which was very, very unique at the time. And this was when student investing and really investing in, someone coming out of college or someone who's in college was kind of unheard of. Facebook was barely off the ground and it was still a sort of internal college thing and stuff. So, the way we understand student investment today did not exist back then. So that was very interesting. I actually went very, very reluctantly into the polymers and plastic space because it was sort of my family enterprise. But I went into it when the stock market crash happened in 2007, 2008. When that happened, a lot of other opportunities dried up. And I knew that this company, my family enterprise, which is also a public listed company, wanted to expand and wanted to go into other regions. They only had 2 manufacturing facilities at the time, India, and then they had a presence in India, and then they had a facility in the Middle East in Dubai. They wanted to go to other locations, and I knew that it was a good time to go in there, grow, and then expand. And so from then, the journey started to going to places like Egypt, to Poland, to Mexico, to United States, to, now of course to Russia, to Hungary, and to even Nigeria. And so it's been a fun ride. But if you really ask me, was it a real choice? It was, in a way it was, but it was also, in a way, it was an obligation that I fulfilled. And then when I went into it, I started liking it, enjoyed it, and I love it now.
Yeah. What did you like about it when you started? Because I would imagine that plastic industry at that time or the polymer industry when you started is very different from what it is today. Public perceptions have changed, the economic cycles have changed. So walk us through the changes in the space.
Well, the changes in the space, I'll be honest with you, the most attractive thing, and this was actually even true back then, and this has actually been validated now, which makes all the difference. Which when I started in the space, I saw that the way the polymer industry, the plastics industry in general was conducting itself, Utkarsh, was they were all behaving as if they are unaware. I mean, the best way to put it is that they were all behaving that they're dinosaurs, and they're unaware that the meteor is coming. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Everybody was sort of living under a rock and thinking like nothing's going to happen. And for me, as a young, sort of 25-year-old at the time, 26-year-old entering into this business, I could see this massive opportunity where I said, wow, this is an industry where, at this present moment, at this point of time, at this specific point of time, there's an opportunity to flip everything around, to change everything about how this business operates from the ground up. And how many times in a business's life cycle, in an industry's life cycle, do you get that opportunity? If you look at, computers, you got that opportunity really, you got that opportunity maybe in like, the 80s and, late 80s, early 90s. And then, once, those codes were set and the software was set and the ecosystems were this, the winners were the winners, the losers were the losers, and that's what happens. Or if you look at oil, that opportunity really happened in like, between the 40s and the 60s, right? And then, the ecosystems get set, and then, the barriers eventually get set up. Here, the industry was still very, very fragmented. And even despite of them fragmented, innovation was very, very low. And nobody was thinking about, forward thinking about what the future of this space will look like. So I was like, wow, this is actually an amazing opportunity where you can just change everything around and focus it on sustainability, focus it on recycling, focus it on using polymers in a completely different way. And that's eventually what consumers will want too. It's just a matter of time, because, that's the direction where we're headed. So that's what really drove my interest, primarily in the space, where I was like, oh, if I can pull this off, then that's a very impactful thing to be able to pull off, as opposed to being a consultant for 30 years, and where, you still do good work as a consultant for 30 years as a banker, which I could have been, right? I could have been a banker, a consultant. I would have worked on great deals and things like that, but you don't get to pull off, an industry cycle shift.
Agree. What was your hesitation in joining your family business at that time? And how did that change once you actually joined and started actually discovering the blue ocean opportunity?
Oh, I'm going to make a lot of people upset by saying this answer, but I'm going to say it, it's kind of like, if you see The Godfather, right? You have that line from Al Pacino, every time I get out, they pull me right back in. That was my fear, right? Because once you join a family business, it's not only a business, it's a family, right? And your exit plan is, you don't get an exit plan, right? So it's a big commitment to join. And then if you want to, tomorrow say, hey, I want to go leave and do something else, or this is not really suiting me. I want to go and, I don't know, start a real estate fund, or hey, I like this other opportunity that's a little bit better. I'd like to go and spend my time there. Those options are tough, especially in the system that I am in, which a lot of Asian entrepreneurs, I think, would find themselves in, which is first generation going to second generation, right? If you're an established family business with 4 or 5 generations under your belt, and you guys have a constitution and things and a family office, it's a whole different story. But we're a very young family business. So it's like, once you're in, you have to commit. And then, your chances of exiting, or your chances of really saying, oh, I'm really not into this so much, I want to go do something else. That was my biggest hesitation.
And how did you overcome the challenge? What was your process of finding your own feet in an organization that was set up much before you were interested?
So, Karsh, the best way to say that is, the first thing I had to learn was patience. And that was really, really hard, because, when you come in and as a young person, in any organization, you want to see how much impact you can make, what are the things that you can do, and what are the changes that you can bring from the perspective that you're bringing, but organizations are established, and organizations hate change, right? So first thing I had to learn was just to be very, very patient with, the enterprise, the ecosystem, the industry also in general, right? Saying that, okay, I might be pitching something that I know will be inevitable, and it's the writing's on the wall that this is the product that will work in the future. But for 2-3 years, nobody would approve the project, or nobody would actually buy anything, even if I was selling it. So patience was a sort of key thing to it. And then I said the second biggest thing I would be comfortable. I had to get comfortable with taking risks and making sure that they either work out for my benefit, and if they don't work out for my benefit, then if I get reprimanded for them later, then I'm okay with that, right? I mean, so that's the second biggest thing, and which I don't think a lot of people will actually tell someone, but I will tell you, that's the biggest thing. Like a lot of times, you want to do something in a limited ecosystem, which is very close, especially, I would say the polymer business is very old guard run,
Yeah.
and it's becoming, weirdly enough, it's becoming more old guard run, not less, which is strange thing, strange dynamic. So what happens is, you take a risk and you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to go ahead and develop this product, and really going to ask anybody's permission. And only once the product is developed and stuff, and you have customers, lining through the door, then you say like, okay, I have once you have that, you have the validation, right? From the external stakeholders, and that validates what you did. Now, if you screw it up and the product, goes, 4 times the budget, and you can't pull it off the ground, or the science is impossible, and then you have to be okay with saying, sorry, I took 20% of the R&D budget and I put it to something that really didn't work. My bad. And then be reprimanded for it, right? And maybe have your R&D budget cut next year, or have your growth of your segment of the business delayed, and maybe more resources given to another segment of the business. So that's the risk and balance that you have to play. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. And third thing, long-winded answer, but I would say the third thing is, you have to be really aware of seeing things the way they are, not the way you want them to be. So what do I mean by that? You have, in this kind of ecosystem, in this kind of enterprise, you have to really live in reality and apply, a very clear perspective on that reality, so that you can make results happen to what you see fit, because it's very easy to get lost in what you want, out of a certain enterprise, a certain return, a certain, factory to produce a certain thing. But if they're not capable of that, they don't have the resources, that's not going to happen, right? So that was the biggest thing, like understanding your own power within the system, and then realizing what's your own power, what kind of reality can that really affect, and being realistic about that, not being unrealistic that, oh, I'm going to come and drive 200% sales from this business unit because, I am who I am, and I went to Babson, and I have this experience, and I need to make an impact. But that business cannot produce that. You can't get that. So be realistic, but then deliver on those realistic goals, and that's good enough.
How did you see the product mature, and how was it received by the market? I know you've now grown to become a fairly large, perhaps the largest in the space in the region, but I'm sure it wasn't a straightforward process. What advice do you have for people in your shoes? What advice would you have given yourself, say 5-7 years back?
Sure. So when I joined the company, we were about I would say the 20th largest polymer producer in the space where we are. Today we're the 3rd largest. So if I give you some context, that's been sort of our growth. The product, if I really talk about how did I see the product mature, the best thing that I have seen about our product, and this is where I go back to my earlier point about how the industry shift happened, right? Polymers and plastics in general, Utkarsh, we are headed towards a time when, we as human beings cannot use fossil fuels and oil and basically, non-renewable resources to make this product that we use once or twice and then discard, and it goes to a landfill and stays there for no apparent purpose, right? So polymers is shifted over time to a model where this kind of activity, which basically, generates waste from waste, is ending. And we're headed now to a new paradigm where consumers want to reuse the polymers that they're already using to make new products, or they want to use their existing use of all materials, not just polymers, but all materials is more responsible because they want to have a better balance with the earth, with Mother Earth. They want to have a better balance in their own lifestyles, and they want to know if they are contributing their share to the growth of future generations, not to the detriment of future generations, which was not something, I believe a consumer asked themselves even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but today consumers ask themselves that question. And that's the main driving focus of, I would say, how the customers today accept the product. That's what, my design team, my research teams start from. What is the product that we're going to make today that's going to have a consumer tomorrow not make the choice? And I say the word not make the choice between what they're using and what the value the product is providing and what the environmental impact of that product is. These things are not mutually exclusive. They have to come in the same package.
Yeah. It's always interesting to see people in the plastic space talk about the environment. I was wondering, as and when you've had conversations with climate activists, how have those conversations gone? I believe you were on a couple of panels where things were interesting. So can you tell us about what were the areas of agreement, what were the areas of disagreement, and where do you see this industry evolve?
So, I'll say, when I talk to climate activists, I look forward actually to having those conversations, because a lot of times the biggest thing is there's a lot of misinformation on both sides. A lot of times someone like me will not understand the goals and the the driving motivations behind what someone from a climate lobby or an environmental lobby wants to do. And a lot of times they will not have practical solutions. They are not informed about the practical solutions that exist today, the technology that exists today that may be already on the table to help them achieve the goals that they want to achieve. And a lot of times, those goals are actually mutually beneficial. They're actually, mutually achievable, and they're a win-win for both. Because see, what does the plastics industry, the polymer industry in general want? They want to exist in the future, right? Their biggest challenge today is they wake up every morning and they think, oh my God, the world is against plastics, and everywhere we hear plastics is a great evil. And they're like, man, we're not going to exist tomorrow. We're going to be replaced, and we're not going to be in existence, right? And the environmental, activists, what do they want? They want a cleaner earth. They don't want to deal with plastics in the oceans. They don't want to deal with plastics in landfills. They don't want to deal with plastics polluting the sides of streets and to hillsides and things. So how to solve this problem? This problem that these people want to exist, and and the other side that they want the world to be cleared of plastic. The way really how to make these two things meet is to make sure that the plastic that exists in the world goes back to the people who want to exist. And if the plastic that exists in the world goes back to the people whose life it is to make sure that their livelihood exists because of plastic, they will figure out ways. They already have figured out ways to use that plastic, to reuse that plastic, and to make sure that that plastic does not, sit on the side of the street or sit on a beach or sit somewhere, but gets reused and gets entered back into the economy. But that's where the biggest disconnect is. The biggest disconnect is these two sides don't meet and talk about that. These both sides worry in their silos about their own problems. But eventually, I think this problem, these two sides are beginning to unite and beginning to understand. And that's why you see today sustainability and recycled products, biodegradable products, packaging associated with biodegradable products is much, much more, potent and alive than it was before, and we've really
Yeah.
taken a big lead in this.
And is there something that you've changed your mind about in the past few years when it comes to facilitating such a dialogue?
The biggest thing I've changed my mind about is that I used to truly believe that private enterprises, companies, private institutions will drive this change because it's in their best interest to drive the change, to give something to the consumers, the economy, the world that makes them future-proof. But what I've actually realized over time, Utkarsh, that's not going to happen. This change will be driven through consumers voting through their dollars and regulation eventually stepping in to force industry, which is actually kind of sad, because we all hear all these large CPGs, and we hear about all these large enterprises making all kinds of commitments. We're going to go completely green by 2025. We're going to go completely green by 2030, 2035. But the actual truth on the ground level is they're not. They're not changing that because the people who are there, they are more responsible to their shareholders, and they're more responsible to not adding to their cost structure, which is actually a marginal, I would say, transition cost. It's not a long-term cost, but everybody's very, very addicted to oil because oil is very predictable. Oil is very, it's a known commodity, When you talk about saying, hey, we're going to replace making something instead of oil, I'm going to make it out of a corn-based plastic. I'm going to make it out of a sugarcane-based biomaterial. Well, that's not a predictable raw material. All of a sudden you're like, well, there's no models for that. Where are you going to source the raw material? What happens when tomorrow, if there's a food crisis? What happens if there's a pandemic and, people require food more than they require sustainable packaging? Those resources will be diverted. So will I still be able to get my hands on my packaging? Something like that, right? So since those models don't exist, people are like, man, you know what? Let's still buy oil. And that's the biggest thing I've changed my mind about. I really thought, people, when they make a commitment, they will sort of follow through on that, but that's not what will happen. What we're going to head into right now, the way I see it, we're going to head into another version of the Volkswagen Gate scandal, right? Where eventually we'll head into a plastic gate scandal, where, some lab will do a study of like products on the shelf, and they'll be like, hey, this company committed to saying, their products will be sustainable by 2030. Hey, it's 2030, and instead of 100% or 90% or 80% of their products being sustainable, only 10% are, right? And then we're going to hear a series of apologies and things, and then either we're going to see a quick shift after that, which is what we're seeing, for example, in the automotive industry today, right? We're just seeing this massive shift towards like electric and hybrid cars because the automotive industry in general missed that paradigm. They just missed it. Like they just chose not to see it, right? And then this small little company in California saw it, sold very, very premium cars, but they are choosing not to go mass market, which they can't, right? I mean, it's very hard to go then like completely mass market, So then now everybody jumping on the bandwagon, but it's much, much, much later, And that's the same kind of thing. Unfortunately, history repeats itself. And I'm seeing the same kind of paradigm happening. The same kind of shift will happen in the polymer industry too. Maybe in 2030, maybe 2035, maybe sooner if we're lucky.
When we think about sustainability, it means a lot of things to a lot of people. What does it mean to you, and how should public companies think about being loyal to their shareholders as well as to society?
The best way, if you ask, I'll answer this question in two parts, since it's two questions. What does sustainability mean to me? Sustainability, what sustainability means to me is making products that are designed to not impact the environment in a negative way in the future and have a purpose beyond their original use so that they don't, cause any kind of detriment to
Hmm.
the environment or ecosystem that they're placed in, right? If you ask me personally, that's what sustainability means to me. And that also it's also what sustainability means to me when I am making a choice as a consumer, right? So if I'm buying clothes or I'm buying, cosmetics or products or a vehicle or something, and I'm trying to make a sustainable choice, I will apply the same logic. Like, oh, is this product going to cause a detriment in the future? How long is the usability actually of this product? Is it worth that usability? Am I going to use it for a long run or a short run? And obviously, there's a price and a value attached to that. What it really should mean to public companies. I've actually said this briefly before, and it's kind of the same point. Public companies need to understand the consumers of the future, especially after the pandemic. The young consumers that I see in the future, they don't want to make the choice of whether it's good for them or it's good for the environment. For them, that's the same thing, right? So when they're
But in
buying
the
a
short
product,
term, there might
yeah,
be trade-offs, right? I think that'll be very interesting for our listeners to understand. As a public company, you need to perform quarter on quarter.
yeah.
And do you see that performing quarter to quarter can be at odds with environmental goals, or they are actually helpful to environmental goals?
The choice is, Utkarsh, you can perform okay or well quarter on quarter and ignore the environmental goals, but then have no future. Or you can adjust
Mhm.
and perform, again, decently well quarter on quarter, but have a future and have a long-term strategy of how you're going to enable that choice to the consumer. So that's really what will happen. In terms of
Yeah,
short term, if you see Milton Keynes say, in the long term we're all dead, right? So,
yeah.
but it's way,
John Maynard Keynes, yes. Yeah.
yeah, so if you say short term, yes, if you're looking very, very short term, this choice is not to be made. But if you're looking medium to, long term, this choice needs to be made, but the changes would have to be made today. And if you're not ready, you could very well be in a position where the products that you're dependent on in the short term, 6 quarters, 8 quarters from now is no longer valid.
Yeah. I think that's, as a CEO or head of a business, you constantly have to think about balancing the short term versus the long term.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the CEOs are not able to make that trade off well. And there are so many examples in tech and other industries of companies that have adapted and companies that have not. So it's good to see that you've always tried to strike that balance.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about how pandemic affected your business and how you sort of realigned or repurposed and still moved along?
So for us, Utkarsh, the pandemic was, of course, an unforeseen challenge, just like it was for most businesses. But for us, the biggest challenge was, we were designated very quickly as essential industry because we were making polymers for food, for medicines, for pharma, all kinds of industries that were essential. And if we stopped running, then, grocery stores eventually would not have a supply of packaged goods. So for us, the biggest challenge was how do we adapt to the new normal on a global scale and still keep our facilities running and protect our people. So for us, we were a little, we got a little lucky that we had a great safety team. We had a great safety committee on a global level, which kind of started sending early warning signs, I got an alert last year in January from our, global safety committee saying, hey, you need to start, purchasing thermometers and start purchasing, sanitizers and things. And at that time, when I looked at their budget, I was like, what are you guys talking about? Like, you guys want me to get fired? Like, if I make this proposal that going to install thermometers and stuff, what are we talking about here? Because even I was not, very aware of what this pandemic would really shape out to be. But, they said, no, this is our recommendation. This is what we have to do. So we did it. And that saved us, that allowed us to be ready when things got, tough around, March, April time, when things got really, really tough. In Asia, I would say May, June time. And then, we did not shut down any plant of ours for a single day. And we actually had 3 expansions going on during that time, which were
Wow.
Hungary, Poland, and Russia. And it was a challenge to complete them on time. There were some delays, obviously, but the challenge that was given by the board and by the chairman to me was to finish it by end of 2020, and then that's what we did. Me and
How did you
some,
do that? That must have been challenging.
it was challenging. I mean, the biggest thing was getting people on site, uh, you know, with the travel restrictions, with the entry and exit restrictions and things, and getting around that. That was sort of the biggest challenge. But if I tell you, the simple answer was just sheer willpower, just sheer trying to get it done. And Nigeria came online, I remember, like December 23rd, and I was like, oh, hallelujah. Like I was like, it happened in 2020. So if it had gone to January 2nd, I would have still got a letter saying, good job, but you missed the deadline, but
Mm.
but the fact that it happened in 2020, it was that. But honestly, it was just sheer working out the logistics, making, staying on top of those calls, staying on top of those projects, and making sure that they get done while not risking anyone's safety, not putting anyone in a position where they're exposed to anything, and then making sure all the quarantine norms are being followed, wherever people are being sent or not sent. Also, digitalization was a big part of it. I mean, for us, you know, polymers in general, I would tell you, is a very, very old school space. The adoption of digital tech is very, very low. And, people don't apply technology. I mean, I occasionally still get a customer that faxes in an order, and I find it ridiculous. Someone still faxes in an order. And I guess we have to tell them, like, you know what, we're not going to accept orders on faxes anymore. Please tell them, like I'd rather set up an app for them that they, put the order in there than they're faxing the order. It's ridiculous, but it still happens, you know. So it's a very, very old school industry in general. But we adopted digital helmets so that other
Hmm.
experts who can't visit the site, they can wear the helmet and sort of navigate and help people who are local there navigate the site and do that. So there was a lot of tech that was also adapted to make sure that we met our goals. But it was a challenge.
That sounds fascinating. I mean, must have been a leadership in crisis management and delivering to everybody involved. So well
Yeah.
done. I mean, it seems
Thank
like a
you.
team victory.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, what are you looking forward to? In the coming years? What are the long-term goals, and what kind of people do you enjoy working with to achieve long-term goals?
Sure. Gosh, the long-term goals, I mean, for me personally, would be um, to really drive this industry change further along and have this industry change happen, you know, within the next 5 to 10 years. This is something that I've been working on now for the last 10 years myself, for the last decade myself, especially when it comes to sustainability, making films out of 100% post-consumer recycled waste, making films or making packaging out of biodegradable, material that will, essentially self-destruct in 6 months or 6 years if you choose it, if that's what the brand owner chooses. But a lot of these things, even now, Utkarsh, are very, very beautiful, elaborate conversations, but they don't translate into products being put on the shelves. And for me, the long-term goal is how do I get these products to not become, just conversations. We have a project within the company called Project Plastic Fix, and I named it Project Plastic Fix. I think plastics is a problem, but it can be fixed. But the world is also addicted to plastics in a way that we don't realize, and everybody needs their fix, and that's why I call the Project Plastic Fix, because you got to fix this problem, but it is a fixable problem. It's not like other environmental issues that exist, like for example, greenhouse gases, which is a very, very difficult problem to fix unless you have a complete reversal on the transportation system. it's and the gases that exist, I don't know of many technologies that exist that can actually clean up and create clean gases as opposed to the greenhouse gases that exist in the environment today. While in plastic, you can clean up the plastic that's littering the earth today and make new plastic out of it. It's a fixable, reusable, solvable problem. So for me, my personal goal is how to get those conversations to become a reality. And the people that I'm looking for are people who are willing to take that goal on with me, who don't want to take the easy path, who are willing to do the hard work, who are willing to grind their shoes and knock on customer doors and knock on consumer doors and knock on as many doors as they need to make sure that those that happens, and that have also the same drive and the same sort of purpose within their heart and within their soul to achieve the same shift where they see this as a solvable problem. And the key thing is I like working with people who are passionate, who are hardworking, and who are loyal, not so much loyal to me, but loyal to the cause, loyal to the vision, loyal to the goal where we're headed to. Because if I am disloyal to that, then loyalty to me is useless.
Yeah.
But if you're loyal to the goal, you're loyal to the vision, then your loyalty is sustained, no matter what happens to the top leader.
That's really well put. Like mission-driven people are always energizing to work with, who will be able to deliver, who are in love with the problem, not necessarily the solution, or because they can change their minds, they can focus on a lot of things. It seems like, you have thought extensively about the subjects of working with different kinds of people on challenging goals. Talk to me about some of your failures, because when you pursue ambitious goals, lots of things don't work out. And what have you learned from it? What advice do you have for young millennials who are trying to figure things out? How should they look at failure?
Yeah. So this is, I mean, I could talk about this, topic extensively, Utkarsh. In the start of my career, I had tremendous failures. I mean, one of the original companies I had started was an IT, IT software company that was like a recruiting tool company. And, my founder of the company actually took all the initial investment that we had raised from our, friends and family circle, and used it to go gambling and gambled away all the funds. And I came back to a balance sheet that was zero over a weekend. And I tried, I talked to him about it and things, and he just sort of said, no, I don't know what happened and things. And then, of course, eventually the truth came out and things and stuff, but it was too late. And I had to tighten my belt and get to work and figure out a way with no resources, no business, no nothing, figure out a different way to raise that capital back and return that money. I could only return the principal at the time. I couldn't give any interest or any return to them. But it was very important for me to return that money because I could not be painted as a fraud in those other people's eyes, So the lessons, I would say, the biggest lesson I would say from failure is, and it has happened, so many small, product failures and things failures, and you try to do plant failures, and and I would even attest, some of the biggest failures are failures that happen in your personal life. You have failure when you are working, hardworking, driven. You fail in relationships. You fail to keep up with relationships. Things like that happen as well. Those are lessons as well that you got to incorporate, right? But the biggest thing that I've learned is it's whenever you come out of a failure, there's always a sort of temptation to say, you know what, I failed, but it's okay. I'm going to push this aside and I'm going to forget about this and I'm going to move on and I'm going to focus on that. But that actually is a mistake. That doesn't work. The biggest thing is, again, I would say one has to be patient with their failures. It takes time to understand why something happened, what caused you to do that, what was your contribution in that, and really understand the lesson that you have to learn from that failure, really absorb it, and
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't emerge overnight, and it doesn't emerge if you are trying to sort of shove it aside and put it aside. You have to be patient with it. You have to watch it. You have to watch it evolve, and eventually the lesson will come to you. Eventually, the learning from that failure will come to you, but it will take time. It takes time for it to evolve. It's not something that will just come to you right away. However, you know, on one side I will say that. On the other side, I will say, that you need to get busy after a failure. You cannot, unless unless you choose to go out for a meditation camp or go for a reflection series or something. That's how some people choose to do it. And if that's what you choose to do, that's fine. But after you come back from whatever your thought clarity process is, whether you go for a golf holiday or whatever kind of whatever people choose to do, come back and go to work. Jump back on the horse. I used to do a lot of amateur car racing in college. It was one of my passions, right? And I remember, I remember the best way I'll tell you is I remember taking this lap, these series of, this track out in Connecticut, in Lime Rock, Connecticut, and I was, doing these amazing laps. So I had this perfect time. And when I came back, the lead coach said, "Oh, Anant, you have the perfect, you are taking technically the perfect lap, but you're not the fastest, right? So you got to push up the speed a little bit. You're really, really good, but you're not the fastest." So I said, okay. So the next lap I went out and I did again the same lap, but I went a little faster. And I lost control of the car and I crashed the car, and the whole car got totaled. Luckily I signed up for insurance, otherwise that would be a big problem, right? But the whole racing car got totaled. And then I was taken back to the barracks, right? The racing barracks. And the coach was like, okay, you know what? You pushed the car a little bit too hard. You couldn't control it. And, we totaled it on the side of that curve. Okay, get back into the second car. And I just looked at him like, no. I screwed that up. But, I just want to take a break. He's like, no. Go back. Start again. You have to get back on the horse. His exact words, get back on the horse, son. He's like, go back in the car. Start again. We are not, sitting here for you to wallow in your thing. Go back and do it again. And it was a huge lesson. I still remember, the coach's name was Travis, I still remember him to this day, right? Where he just like, go back. And sure enough, I would have quit for the rest of the day. I had 6 hours more of racing to go. And I would have kind of walked away, and just watched other people do laps and wallowed in my, in my failure. But I didn't. I went back and the rest of it was good, and by the end of the day, I was one of the fastest. I was probably not the fastest, but I was one of the fastest. I achieved the goal that I wanted. So those were probably my two biggest, lessons I could sort of talk about from a failure perspective. That be patient with it, but also get back on the horse and start running with whatever you need to run with to keep yourself busy, but also learn. Be patient with the learning, don't try to rush the learning.
Interesting. I like the way you phrase your lessons from failure. And I think these incidences where you have a setback, but you bounce forward, fail forward, defines you. They say that you are what you do every day over and over again, or life is what you do every day over and over again. And I think it's really interesting how you shared it, and I can see how you apply it in a day-to-day life. I can connect the dots. Before we conclude, who are you beyond work? Like, how do you learn? What do you read? What kind of company and networks do you keep?
Oh, sure. So, for me, I love cinema. So what I like doing most outside of work is I love watching movies, and as obscure movies as I could find, as independent and as many subtitles as I could find. That's what I like watching. So I spend a lot of time outside of work. I'm in sort of an amateur producer. So I sometimes produce some short films here and there. I have produced a few in the past. I have a few projects that are, a few irons that are in the fire right now that I'm sort of working on. I love reading extensively. A lot of people will say that, but for me, reading is easy because pre-corona, I used to travel a lot. because of my job. And when you take a good book with you, it's the only thing that you don't need to switch off in an airplane, don't have to put away for taxi and landing, and you kind of always have it with you. So I was always sort of a reader growing up, bit of a loner reader vibe, and I still kind of have that. But I read a combination. I mean, I read a combination of sometimes business and fiction. I read two books most of the time at the same time. I read like a fiction book, so like I'm reading 40 Rules of Love right now, which I find very, very interesting. And then I'm also reading, just about wrapping up, Einstein's autobiography by, by
Walter Isaacson. Walter Isaacson.
Walter. So it's kind of like, when I get sort of tired of reading too much about Rumi, I will, go and, spend some time with Einstein and sort of float back and forth. And that's what I do, sort of spend time between those two worlds. But in terms of, in terms of my social circles and things, for me, it's like, I try to spend time with friends and family where I have a real connection. I'm not a very elaborate social person, I would say. So I don't have a very, very elaborate social life. I didn't have one before coronavirus, and I think it's become even more limited after coronavirus, or after the pandemic, But I kind of just make plans kind of with the same people over and over again. The biggest thing actually I'm looking forward to in the summertime is kind of just getting some time with my motorcycle. I love sort of, for me, it's very meditative to just take my bike out and have a few miles under my belt, and just go to an obscure spot with some food and a good book and maybe a mat in my bag, and just sit there by myself for a few hours, and then just hop back in the evening, and stuff. And that has been not something that I've been able to do the last couple of I would say months. So I'm really looking forward to getting that back in my life in the summer.
That's amazing. My MBA internship was at Harley Davidson, so
wow.
I resonate your love for bikes. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And I'm looking forward to the Pan America. That's the new bike that Harley is releasing. I don't know whether you still follow their
I do closely.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I checked the electric bike when it was launched, and they did a trial in not trial, but they did kind of a launch at the Classic Car Club in New York, which I'm a member of because I'm an automotive guy. So So if you're ever in this part of the world, we'll have a lot to talk about when it comes to bikes and cars.
Yeah, clearly. Network Capital have local chapters everywhere, and there is one subgroup focused on biking and love for cars. So you should definitely join that, and I'd love to see you in New York. Clearly, lots to talk about. Anant, it's been such a pleasure hosting you on Network Capital, and I see it as a first of many discussions. We also have fellowships like the CEO Fellowship. I don't know what I want to do with my life fellowships, the summer school, VCP, family business, etc. And I think you will add value to so many different things. Before you leave, any parting advice for somebody struggling, somebody trying to figure things out, somebody trying to hack it in the family business ecosystem?
Sure, Kash, absolutely. Am I still audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. Okay, great. My only advice is, someone said this to me a while back, and it completely resonates. When you're struggling, just remember, even if you're not a religious person, and you don't have to be, but someone said this to me from their own perspective. But when you're going through hell, that's the only way to see God, right? So that's the only advice that I will say. That if you're going through a tough time, it's easy to say when you're on the outside, but believe me, we've all been there. And whatever it is, whether it's in your business, whether it's your personal life, whatever it is, if you're going through a tough time, the most important thing for you to do is pick up, your bag, put your clothes on in the morning, pull your socks up, and keep going. You will find purpose. You will find, whether you want to call it God, universe, your purpose, your destiny, whatever you're looking for, whatever you're seeking, you will find it. But the challenge to you is keep going. Don't look back. Don't dream of the future, that's not there yet in front of you. Just see what's in front of you today and keep going. And that's the only advice I can give them right now. That's what I try to do. And it served me. That's the one first piece of advice that served me well so far.
Yeah, well, what a profound note to conclude. Anant, until we meet again in New York or London or Delhi or somewhere,
Yes.
have a wonderful day and keep doing the phenomenal work that you're doing in this entire unexplored, underexplored space of alternate plastics.
Thank you for having me, Utkarsh. Thank you so much.